So my name's Joe. I'm a neurodivergent modern mystic, perennialist, and I really love mysticism. And we're going to talk about that today. But what does that mean? My goal is to end suffering for myself and others. I think that's the most practical thing there is to do. I mean, I think we all want to suffer less, right? Well, that's not true. Some people love suffering, but I want to suffer less. We all know one person, right? Okay. But yeah, so I got into tarot really young, and it's been a huge thing throughout my life, and it's kind of been this underlying, as neurodiverse people know, we like models, we like ideas, we like maps, we like everything to make sense in a way that is fun, and is a way that is sometimes colorful and sometimes conceptual, and so tarot has been a map for me throughout a lot of my life. And tarot is kind of the gateway drug into the occult. I don't know if you knew that. You kind of study tarot and then you realize, oh wait, there's a lot to this. Oh my God, there's Qabalah. Oh my God, there's Hermeticism. Oh my God, there's energy, there's alchemy. Oh my God, there's this, there's that. So it leads you into all these places. So we're not going to go anywhere. I know people are going to be like, oh, what are we going to do? It's not like that. Come on, you're at Anahata's Purpose. You're going to see some pentagrams around here. Come on. But what I really want to teach you all today, what I'd love for you all to walk away with is the knowledge that tarot is more than it appears to be. And it is just as much a tool of mystical inquiry as everything else, including transpersonal psychology, Qabalah, Hermeticism, astrology, yoga, all of these different things. Tarot is just as valid and just as effective in looking at ourselves and growing and being more who we are today than yesterday, which is on one level what mysticism is about. So before I go on, and we're going to talk about mysticism in a sec, but before I go on, what do you guys think of when you think of tarot? What's it? Guidance. Guidance, love it, great, guidance, What else? Foreshadowing, I love it, very cool, very cool. What else? Gypsies, okay, I love it, yes, yep. There's absolutely that connotation. What else? Divination, beautiful, love it. Anything else? Well, the question is, what do you think of when you think of tarot? What associations do you have to tarot cards? Guidance, love that, beautiful. Okay, cool. So I'll tell you, what happened? Who studies tarot? Throw your hands up if you study tarot. Very cool. Okay, cool. Do you ever read a book on tarot and you're like, what is this guy talking about? What is she talking about? Like nuts. Okay. In this class, you're going to learn why people sound some books sound very nuts when they talk about tarot. So books tend to go in one of two ways with tarot. They're either very easy and like almost too easy to understand, like this card means this and this card means that. That's cool, love that. And then there's the deep end, which is like talking about esoteric symbols and Qabalah and weird stuff, and you're like, what? So there's levels to tarot just like anything else. It's like, I don't know, what's a fun activity? I'm getting into biking right now. So I'm biking. I'm not calling myself a cycler. I'm not cycling yet, but I'm biking, you know what I mean? But you notice the difference, right? You all nodded, right? So there's biking and there's cycling. And I like biking in my neighborhood, and I bike like on the trail, and it's nice, but it's not cycling. My seat is still lower than my handlebars. So when it's above the handlebar, then I'll be a cyclist. Okay. So cycling has a lot more to do with aerodynamics and fuel and longer races and things that I don't understand, and biking is very chill. Tarot does a lot of the same stuff. There's tarot, and then there's tarot, okay? So what tarot is, we kind of have to look at the history to understand this. Tarot in the New Age world, tarot is a great source of guidance, a great source of foreshadowing, as you said, a great source of personal growth, divination. But it's also, especially over the past couple centuries, it has become a map of the perennial philosophy. Whoa, who's heard of the perennial philosophy? Throw your hands up. Okay, cool. Let's talk about that. So the perennial philosophy is the idea that there is this one underlying current of wisdom that every religion, every philosophy, every tradition comes out of. And it all leads back to one. Sounds pretty awesome, right? Now, when you read occultists, they'll say like, oh, the old mages of old created this ancient knowledge and da-da-da-da-da, and then cultural appropriation, this, that, blah, blah, blah. And they bring it all together, and I love that vibe. Who doesn't love that, right? Historically, that's not really what happened, right? We can't trace all of the wisdom of the world, of all the religions, all the philosophies, all the mystical traditions to this one source. Or can we? What happens when you read enough about mysticism and spirituality and tarot is, who's had that feeling where you read something from one book and then you read it in another book and you're like, oh, I read that just like 2 weeks ago. I read that, right? Yes, we all have had that. How connected is this stuff, right? Well, one reason is because of the New Age movement has connected it for us over the past few decades. But more specifically, there is, historically or not historically, some, and I don't know what it is, but there is some undying, indescribable truth underlying all these traditions. Do you agree? You don't have to. It's not a cult in here. You can say, actually. So that belief that there is some truth underlying every religion, every philosophy, every tradition is called, and that they all share in some overlap of truth, is called perennialism. And I promise you, 99% of the people that go out and read about mysticism and really research it historically and understand what different traditions are saying, will start to see the similarities. So we should define mysticism, I guess. Mysticism is impossible to define, so I'm going to define it anyway. Mysticism is simply anything, knowledge, practice, tool, anything that helps you connect more deeply to reality. Reality. Whether that's God or the divine or your true self or your higher self or your future self or your whatever. Anything that helps you connect to the unitive truth of whatever reality is, which sometimes I call nothing but the truth, so help me God, right? And so what mysticism does in various ways, sometimes through practice, sometimes through theory, sometimes through books and scripture, is it builds a bridge or a pathway or a methodology to get us closer to that apprehension of unity, which that's what I'm all about. Who would love that? I think that's really, everyone's like, no, I'm good, chill, let me be myself. But all these mystical traditions share in what you really can't put into words, but what we can try to put into words as a unifying experience, a unifying whole. So it's kind of the search for wholeness, right? So let me give you an example to kind of contextualize what the hell this is, and I'm talking about. So we have things like yoga, right? And we have like you go to your yoga school and you do postures and all of that, which is great. I love that. But the real yoga, the mysticism of yoga, is about shutting off your mind. Who doesn't want that? Who would love to shut off their mind, right? Throw your hands up. Mm-hmm. And what happens is it takes years, it takes lifetimes, but after you eventually work hard enough and do the practices and do the meditations, when you shut your mind off and there's nothing going on in here, the unity is experienced, okay? So that's one method. So think of like a Swami meditating in a cave and having like samadhi and all of that. Okay. Carl Jung, who knows Carl Jung? Throw your hands up. Yeah, Carl Jung, very influential in the New Age world, though maybe he didn't intend to do so. He had his whole process of individuation, which is getting closer to the self, which is getting a unified experience of your psyche, getting closer and closer to unity through all different methods and active imagination and all of that. What else? We have the Upanishads, which are one of the oldest books ever written from India. And these are texts that directly point to your unity, to the truth of your unity with everything. And they use the words, obviously, Brahman, and they have a whole set of languages that support that. Astrology is not always seen in this way, but you can see it. Actually, there's astrology in the Vedas as well, but astrology, Western astrology, Vedic astrology, whatever, can be argued to be somewhat of a form of mysticism because you're using the planets and the cosmos to reflect back you to you and to understand yourself and see your wholeness in the sky, right? Okay, and one of my favorites is Qabalah. Qabalah is a Jewish mystical tradition that creates this beautiful ladder where you can hopscotch your way right up to God. How cool is that, right? I love neurodivergent brains like me. I love Qabalah because it creates a super sophisticated map. It's one of the most sophisticated studies. But it uses language and numbers and a bunch of things to map out our relationship with God, whatever you want to call it, unity. And yeah, it's really awesome. And over the past couple centuries, Tarot and Qabalah, they kind of got jiggy with it. And the result is something quite beautiful. It's called Hermetic Qabalah. Some people don't like Hermetic Qabalah. I love Hermetic Qabalah. And it is the synthesis of Jewish Qabalah with Hermeticism, with Tarot, astrology, different things. And it creates yet another map of who we are, what we are, and all that fun stuff. So the way that Tarot comes into play through all of this, what we have to understand, so we know the perennial philosophy, right? And we know that it's probably not like these three magi's from thousands of years ago that kind of got this. Maybe it is, I don't know. Maybe Adam did talk to the angel and downloaded the Qabalah and gave it to people, and maybe that happens a lot, right? But it probably wasn't just one source. I don't know, maybe. But a lot of writers and occult thinkers and these esoteric pioneers like to kind of believe that. And so what happens is Tarot, especially over the past few centuries, has become this like ink blot test where all of these occult writers will look at the Tarot and be like, this is from Egypt. This is from Judaism. This is from Hermes Trismegistus. This is from this. And they kind of force feed it all of these mystical traditions, and it becomes this kind of historical train wreck of mysticism, which is awesome because then it's an all in one place, in one model for our crazy brains to dissect and play with. Isn't that fun? So one of the things so we want to debunk the idea that the Tarot is this one unified historical lineage that stems back. But in its historical chaos and in all of the lies and craziness that you'll find in a lot of occult books, there's a beauty, because that's where the perennialism is. That's where people are saying, oh, that method in Hermeticism sounds a lot like the same method in Advaita Vedanta, 4,000 miles away, 600 years away, Didn't have any contact probably. Oh, maybe they did, but probably not. So it's a lot of people drawing connections, and that's what this is. So modern Tarot, what I want everyone to really enjoy, is that modern Tarot, if you use this deck, who knows the Rider-Waite-Smith deck? Okay, great. Who knows the Thoth deck? Uh-oh, holy Crowley, oh boy. We'll keep him over there for now. So it's so ironic because this is the deck that's actually more Christian than this deck. So you would think people wouldn't love this deck who are into tarot and magic and a lot of, we all got our traumas from wherever, religion or not. But there's a lot of Christian stuff in this deck. You will find very little Christian stuff in this one. Anyway, so this deck was created by Arthur Edward Waite, who, surprise, was a Christian mystic. Oh my God, and what's a Christian mystic? A Christian mystic is somebody who's Christian and takes a lot of different mystical philosophy and kind of pulls it in. Not all the time, but yeah. So this deck comes out of a, who has heard about the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn? Okay, cool, right? Who hates them? Yeah! No, I know. You know why? Because it's very cool to hate them now. I don't know. Everyone's like, oh, Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, that's a bunch of rich people that have a lot of time on their hands. I get it. We want to kill the rich. That's cool. But here's the thing with Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn. Hate them, love them. I'm not judging you. You can have any opinion you want. They were a magical order. They did a lot of stuff. They were very rich. They did have too much time on their hands. And they created a very sophisticated magical system. And the fact is, if you use the Rider-Waite-Smith deck, or a deck based on this deck, which is 95% of today's tarot decks, you are, at least to an extent, working with the magical system of the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn. As much as anyone may dislike that or love that, that's what this is. That is what this comes out of, and that is what makes it so rich and beautiful. So Pamela Coleman Smith was the artist of this deck. So it's important to know that she was the actual creatrix of this deck, but Arthur Edward Waite kind of organized it and directed her, and she was also part of the Golden Dawn, so she was pulling in those ideas. So where does this bring us? The Golden Dawn, though they might not be totally perennialist, they were another main point in history where a bunch of people got together and tried to pull in different mystical traditions and connect them all, connect the dots. I love connecting the dots. A lot of people say, Joe, I love how you read tarot. You connect so many dots. How do you do that? You study the history. You just study where the influences come from. So when we're working with the Rider-Waite-Smith deck, we are, at least to some extent, I'm not saying consciously or like all the time, but to some extent, we are working with Hermetic Qabalah, astrology, Hermeticism, and anything that has influenced those traditions, which include Neoplatonism and some other things. Historically, but also ahistorically, meaning that there were definite historical influences, but the mirroring of the correspondences make it beautiful. It's almost the lack of historical connection makes it even more cool how similar these traditions are. Okay, any questions so far? All right, where do we want to go next? So, what does this mean for our relationship with tarot and what we do with it is a big fun question. When we study tarot in the context of all of this, that is what I call esoteric tarot. So what is esoteric? Esoteric is a word that usually denotes a field or a material that is only meant for a select few. So it's kind of a cool gatekeeping thing, like, ooh, esoteric. Like, it's only for like the secret order. It's not for the mainstream. Like, who doesn't love that, right? Makes us feel cool. So the Golden Dawn, the tarot, they were operating in these different spiritual systems that were esoteric. They weren't meant for a lot of people, and there's a couple of reasons for that. Well, one of the reasons was because in certain parts of history, if you were found doing this stuff, you would be killed. So that's a big one. But in more recent history, it's not so much that their life was on the line and they had to hide their practices, as it was the knowledge itself changes you. Because the knowledge that has been put into tarot, especially over the past couple hundred years, it's knowledge that has been cooking in various esoteric circles and mystical traditions for longer, for thousands of years, and it's knowledge that helps you connect to the unity of all things. Now we're back into mysticism. The problem with that is not everybody is ready to do that, willing to do that, or can do that safely. Because when you start studying this stuff, it can be very easily warped into some megalomaniacal proof that you personally are God, right? As opposed to what all these traditions are saying, which is, no, not you personally, it's your true nature, is that divine spark. It's different in every tradition. So people have to put some brakes onto that. But when we operate with tarot on this level, in the esoteric tarot, we are looking at a set of symbolic images that point to our connection with the divine. And when we meditate on them and when we study them and when we integrate them, it kind of speeds up the process. So Western esotericism, which can be kind of looked at as a lot of the magical stuff, a lot of the occult stuff of the West, astrology, tarot, Hermetic Order, Golden Dawn, all this stuff, it has been described as a sort of accelerant of what the Eastern mystics were doing. So remember I told you about yoga, how yoga is this long process where you meditate, and over years and years and years, and even lifetimes, eventually maybe you'll shut off your mind, and in doing so, maybe you'll achieve samadhi, total enlightenment. Well, the argument from the Western esotericist, the Western mystic, is that you can do that in a faster period of time if you study all this stuff. So that's what Damien Eccles says. Does anyone knows Damien Eccles? Right? Yeah. If you're into any Western occult, like ceremonial magic, he's like so cool. Such an amazing person. Very interesting story. You should read up about him. But But that's what he says. It's like the Western esoteric traditions are like kind of throwing fuel at the fire and kind of accelerating this process of enlightenment that the Eastern mysticism, all this stuff, is doing over time. Is that true? I don't know. I can't say. That's up to you to figure out. But that is the claim. But what I do know for me and for many of my students and people that I come into contact with this is when you study this material, things change in you. Your point of view shifts, widens, and this happens on many levels. So I want to talk about two levels with you today, two levels where this spiritual growth occurs. One of them you're probably familiar with, and the other one may be less so. And the first one you actually told me already when I asked, what do you think about tarot? You said guidance, you said foreshadowing, divination. All of these things are an amazing use of tarot on the personal level. Why are they personal? Because the tarot shows you personally, whether you're reading for yourself or if you're reading for somebody else, you're facilitating their understanding of themselves personally. And so the big question is, who am I? And what do I need to know? And more typically, when's so-and-so going to text me back? And what's my health going to look like next year? And will we reconcile? So all of those really desperate YouTube videos you see that are like, he's thinking about you. That's kind of that level, but it's lower than that level. I'm not trying to judge, but come on, people, like, this is damaging. A lot of people get addicted to YouTube tarot, and it's a niche. I used to do a lot of, I used to be in the love niche, so I used to do a lot of tarot readings for love and love coaching. Ooh, it's like deliciously gross, you know what I mean? It's like, it's talk about shadow work. It's like, oh, but I get it. But deeper than that, as you said, guidance, foreshadowing, divination, all these things are helping us navigate the world. And that is super important, and tarot can be used in that way. Now, there's another level to this. So if you were to use this map, everything I just described to you is occurring on this bottom layer here. This is where tarot is used as a tool for, you might say, personal growth, personal understanding, divination. How do I go about the world? And it's very, very useful for that. Very, very useful. Now, there's a deeper level in yellow. And this level is where tarot becomes a transpersonal tool. What does that mean? Trans means across, beyond, above, and personal means personal. So going beyond your personal self. So with this level of tarot is where tarot starts to point to our shared experiences as more a human than just a Joe or a Deborah or a Sue or whoever, right? It's more an inquiry into, it starts to ask the question, wait, what am I? What am I really? And it does this through symbols that don't just point to the ex that that probably won't text us back in a few weeks, or the health we're asking about, or the marriage, but points to the inner energies and archetypes that are activated by these external circumstances. Because when that desperate person on YouTube is like freaking out and like, anxiously searching YouTube videos on tarot reading and being like, oh, is he going to come back? There's something deeper there. There's something obviously deep. There's something that is triggered in that person's nervous system, and that person is not the first person to feel that or experience that. So what the transpersonal scope of tarot does is it helps us integrate these feelings and these energies and these patterns that are actually not personal at all. They're just part of the human experience. And when we can do that, there's a number of beautiful things that happen. One of them being like, oh wait, I'm not alone. And oh wait, this experience is so much bigger than me. And oh wait, I'm actually kind of floating through this shared smorgasbord of archetypes and traumas and amazing feelings and victories and accomplishments, and it's all part of it. So it opens up the door for us to build a relationship with these collective experiences. And to me, that is more valuable than knowing what's going to happen or getting maybe some insight into a personal problem, but kind of seeing it all play out in front of me. And that's what the tarot cards do. So And you'll notice in this perennial approach, tarot is not the first thing to do that. Neither is Qabalah, neither is Carl Jung, neither is Hermeticism or astrology or Plotinus, Tantra, Yoga, Mandukya. It's all across the board. All of these systems, because they are mystical traditions, are helping us build relationships with ourselves at this, not just personal level, but this collective level. So, where does this bring us with tarot and what we can do with it? This allows the tarot to have not just the personal function, but the transpersonal function. And so I'm thinking maybe today we'll go through a couple cards and explore those two functions and these kind of two, I forgot, what is the title of this lecture? Tarot, the deeper meanings. So the deeper meanings are when we go underlying what's happening to us personally, what's really running the show. Is it archetypes like Carl Jung? Is it the nervous system and stuff that you can explore with somatic therapy? Is it the soul and the psyche and the intellect of Plotinus and the Neoplatonic traditions? Is it the chitta and the prana of Tantra? Is it something happening in our breath-body relationship in yoga? Is it, anyway, the list goes on. And it is all of that. It is all of that. So when we rise to that level, what happens is there's a big paradigm shift. Instead of us looking to tarot as a tool to tell us what's going to happen and give us some relief, which a lot of people do. I'm sorry, this is true. A lot of people will turn to tarot, they're not actually looking for a solution, but looking for a momentary relief. And it can actually become its own addiction. They're looking for a fix. They're like, I need something now to feel okay. And that's valid. There's nothing wrong with that. That can be a good thing. The problem is when people do that all the time and they get themselves in a circle and then it's like every 5 seconds, it's like, well, what are the stars doing because I need to feel okay? Can you give me a reading? I need to feel okay right now. But they're doing that as a distraction from actually dealing with their shit, right? So when we use tarot in the transpersonal scale, we start dealing with the shit. We start feeling the feelings, facing the archetypes, and it's a bigger playing field, and it can be intimidating, but it can be so beautiful. And so to tie it back to how I started this, when you read books on tarot and you're like scratching your head and like, what the hell are they talking about, right? They're pulling from, well, at least some authors are pulling from these different traditions to explore this larger playing field, to explore this human experience so that they can further integrate these archetypes, these patterns, these feelings that have been mapped out by all of these different traditions. Okay, any questions now before we continue? All right. There's one other level with tarot, and it's up here, and that level is very hard to talk about without going through everything else, like for months and months and months. So I run a Tarot Mysticism Academy, by the way, and it's a year-long curriculum, and it's very involved. Deborah is a student of mine. Oh, thank you. Deborah says it's awesome. Yay, thank you so much, Deborah. Sue is also a student of mine. And so it's a year-long curriculum, and it's growing, and it kind of goes through these different levels. Shameless plug. But this third level is where the tarot becomes not even a tool to explore this larger plane of the human experience, but what it does is it actually does the opposite of the first two. It collapses everything. Okay, so if the first two levels of tarot explore contents within us, the third level of tarot collapses the content. What do I mean? The first level, the function is personal exploration, right? What's gonna happen? What do I need to know? Is so-and-so gonna text me back? Messages, guidance, divination, all of that, and it's personal. The transpersonal level has a transpersonal function, is what am I feeling and how is this connected to the larger human experience? What is the image of this? What is the symbol? What is the archetype? And then the third level collapses all of it because what it does is it takes the self and the other, right? We all have an inner world and an outer world, and it starts to delete the two and bring them together. And that's the mystical experience. So one of the most common denominators in mysticism is an experience where the self and the other don't exist. There's just existence. There's just unity. There's no difference. And some people experience this on psychedelics. Some people experience this spontaneously. Some people never experience this. And a lot of people experience this studying, going through these different traditions. And it's not something you can teach. It is technically in certain regards. It is something you can teach, but you have to go to someone who's experienced it in that tradition to really get it. But the tarot kind of does this and starts to symbolize this in a way. But this is not the thing you're going to find in books because you really can't write about it. But the symbols point to this moment of, oh my God, I'm everything and everything's me. There's no separation. There's no difference. In the same way as the Tao Te Ching, in the same way as the Upanishads, in the same way as the Samadhi experience of yoga, in the same way as the 8th and 9th sphere of Hermeticism. Yeah, and it's a radical, and it's been my obsession for years because all it takes is a glimpse. But then tarot becomes a very different thing. And the practice of tarot is not even so much reading the cards as it is pointing directly to reality itself. Yeah. It's very ambitious. I'm going to quickly provide you with some more resources to really explore these planes. These different planes, these paradigms, are in every mystical tradition of every culture around the world. And what can be tricky for a lot of people, especially in tarot, is figuring out what plane and what paradigm to apply for what scenario. This is why when you read certain tarot books, sometimes meanings are confusing or contradicting, or sometimes too esoteric and conceptual. They're working from these different planes. So to help you really understand how all this stuff fits together, the tarot, Qabalah, the astrology, the Hermeticism, the Western and Eastern mysticism, I've created a downloadable version of the map of the perennial philosophy from this lecture. So I will leave a link in the description below where you can download this and use it as a guide. You can also put it on your refrigerator. It's a great conversation starter. And then people will come over your place and be like, oh, wow, you know the mysteries of the universe. And you'll say, yeah, I do. And then guys can chat all night like sages and mystics of the past. It'll be great. Of course, these matters are a lifelong study and you can't learn them in one guide. So I wrote a book about it. You can pre-order Tarot Mysticism from wherever books are sold, including Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Books A Million, or directly from the publisher Llewellyn. I'll link all of those in the description below. This is not your mama's tarot book. It's not basic divinatory meanings. This is a full exploration of the Thoth tarot in the context of the perennial philosophy and larger mystical traditions. What this book does is it teaches you the second level, the subtle causal level of the tarot, all the mystical philosophy, a detailed overview of the Kabbalistic tree of life, the paths, the Sephirot, how that's related to numerology, Neoplatonism, Hermeticism, aspects of Advaita Vedanta and other Eastern mystical traditions. It's a deep dive. It will melt your brain, but it will put you back together by the end. But not only does it explore these deeper mysteries embedded in the tarot, it gives you practical exercises to actually use them, not just in reading the cards, but in almost directly experiencing them. You see, there's so much stuff written in Western esotericism, but it's so abstract and it's hidden behind so many symbols and rituals and secrets. This book gives it to you straight up, talks about the symbols, what it means, why, and how you can explore it directly. What happens when you study all the symbols, all the correspondences, all these connected systems, you start to see how you, as a unit of consciousness, are connected to everything that is. And that leads to the third level, which is the mystical plane. At that level, you really can't read that in a book. You just have to experience it. Now, if you want a serious education on all these topics, there's one other resource I can offer you, and that is my direct mentorship through Tarot Mysticism Academy. The Academy takes the perennial philosophy, these three paradigms, these three levels, and teaches courses, trainings, and seminars on all of them. So our curriculum hosts over 12 courses on all three levels, starting with the mechanical plane, where I teach divination, growing your intuition, and how to read confidently and accurately for yourself and others. There's various courses here on that. In the subtle causal plane, I teach the deeper mysteries, exploring Hermeticism, Qabalah, astrology, energy healing, and how to bring all of these together to actually make life more fun and more participatory.
that starts to show how you are the creator of your own reality, how to manifest what you want, how to have a fun time. And then, of course, there is the third plane, the mystical plane, where all of these mysteries come together in that singularity, that mystical experience that is attested to by so many mystics and sages of the past in all cultures. Tarot Mysticism Academy goes all the way there. It's a sort of turning point that accelerates your spiritual growth, your personal growth, your self-understanding, your confidence, and your sense of connection to all that is. We have a loving community of fellow mystical misfits exploring these mysteries, reading for each other, supporting each other. And if you feel called, I would love to have you apply. You can find a link in the description below for more details on our curriculum and see if there's anything available. On top of that, I also have a mastermind and other future programs where I'll be mentoring spiritual businesses, professional tarot readers. So if you ever wanted to take your tarot reading or spiritual work and make it your career in a sustainable way, this is definitely for you. The rest of the lecture is going to start talking more about the actual cards and how these three planes exist in the major arcana cards. If you have any questions or reflections on the content, please don't hesitate to comment below. I'd love to get your thoughts and answer your questions. All right, let's get back to the lecture.
Let's start looking at some tarot cards. So I'm going to pull out the Magician. And what I'll do is I'll actually go through these levels with you on a few different cards. But I want to start with the Magician because the Magician is the thesis of the tarot, really. And he's card number 1. Before the Magician, there's the Fool, which is 0. And the Fool is really the thesis of the tarot, but the Fool is 0, so there's nothing to talk about. Yeah, so we'll bring him back later. Because there's a roundabout thing that's going to happen. We'll get to him. Maybe. I don't know. We might not have time. We'll have to get to him later. But we're going to start with the Magician. It was my favorite card when I was a kid. In every divination system, there's kind of this thesis unit, okay? So who studies runes? Throw your hands up if you study runes. Yes, cool. Yes, cool. Yes. Runes are deep. Because that culture is like, you gotta keep warm or you're gonna die. It's like ice, cows, it's very earthy. Tarot is much more superfluous than that. But runes are fun because the first rune is Fehu, and Fehu means cattle, and it's a rune of wealth. And the idea is cattle was the system of wealth in that Viking era, pre-Viking era, post-Viking era, I don't remember. Nordic. And so the idea was the cattle would move around as people exchanged goods and stuff, right? So there was this idea of movement. Every divination system is going to start with a card or something that has to do with movement. Everyone. And if it's not the first one, it's usually the second one, right? Who reads Lenormand or Lenormand cards? Anybody? No. Oh, Lenormand is really cool. It's its own divination system. It's very detail-oriented. The first card of the Lenormand system is the Rider. Movement. Rider. Movement. And then the Magician, we have movement, but the movement is coming from above to below. So every divination system will start with, usually we'll start with some unit of card or token or whatever of movement. And that is because it is an archetypal symbol of existence moving itself into just starting to kind of move itself into its parts, into us, into our experience, right? Okay, let's talk about the most famous phrase in the world, the coolest slogan that we all love, as above, so below. Who's heard of that? Throw your hands up. Yes. Does anyone know what that's from? What? Huh?
I remember last year you may have mentioned something.
Oh, damn, I have to get new material. She remembers I said this last year. Oh, no. Okay, so as above, so below. As above, so below is a shorthand version of a quote from the Emerald Tablet. And the Emerald Tablet was written on this green tablet, Emerald Tablet, and it was attributed to Hermes Trismegistus. Now, there are alchemical and Islamic and Sufi influences on this. So it's the historical truth of this, is kind of hard to pin down. But a lot of people attribute this emerald tablet to Hermes Trismegistus, who was the sage and brought about Hermeticism. What is Hermeticism? Anything that's been attributed to Hermes Trismegistus. There, very simple, right? And he was this really cool sage. He had a lot to say. Did he exist? I don't know. A lot of this stuff doesn't. But he was at least one of the earliest pseudo publishing companies, esoteric publishing companies, a bunch of mystics coming together, writing under his name and saying, oh, I got a new idea. This is really good. They would download it. They would write it down. They would say, and in the past, there was this thing called pseudepigrapha. So when you wanted your writings to get out into the world, you would write under a name that people respected. And so they would write under Hermes Trismegistus. So we don't really know where these texts come from, but they're in the first couple centuries CE. So we're looking at 200 CE-ish, around the same time as Neoplatonism and some other cool things that were playing around Greece and Egypt. So the ancient knowledge, right? So he says, as above, so below. And that has become just this hallmark phrase for a lot of New Age and mystical work. But it's really beautiful. And if you read the Corpus Hermeticum and you actually read the writings of Hermes Trismegistus, they are totally up there with the Upanishads, yoga, all this stuff, the Tantra. They are talking about directly your relationship with the divine God, whatever you want to call it. And these discourses are literally Hermes Trismegistus helping his son or his student, Tat, or the other guy, get up to this level of mystical experience. And so Hermeticism flourished and then kind of died down. And then in the Renaissance, it was popularized again. And then in the late 1800s, popularized yet again with Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn. Get that? Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn. And that's where we get our tarot from. So there's a lot of Hermetic and Hermetic remixes in the tarot. But the Magician card is a symbolic representation of this axiom, as above, so below. So what does that mean to you guys, as above, so below? Balance, love that, cool.
What's going on up here is going to be happening up here, down here.
Absolutely. What's going on up here is happening down here, yep.
Maybe almost like a karma thing,
Ooh.
if you do something to someone, it's going to come back.
A karma thing, I love that. That's a big one, yeah, because it's like what's lurking in our psyche is going to come out into our body, into our world, and our behavior, and that brings a response. So as above, so below. Yeah, I love that. Very cool. So as above, so below has been popularized even more by holographic paradigms of the universe that I think was initiated by, that kind of was started by David Bohm, I think his name is, and some other writers that kind of said, hey, maybe the universe is holographic. Maybe in every little piece of the universe is the whole, in the same way that in each of us, there's the universe. And then we're going back into Qabalah and all these mystical traditions, which are looking at us as this kind of lower reflection of something larger. So, so the magician is as above, so below. And that's kind of like when we do a tarot reading, right? We're taking what's happening in the larger context and it's pouring itself into the cards literally below us. There it is, right? Remember I told you about that level 3 and I couldn't really talk about the level 3 of tarot? Let's go there, okay? So the magician actually is the thesis of level 3. And so as I told you, level 1 and level 2 have to do with exploring contents. Content being anything, divinatory message, guidance, personal reflection, transpersonal reflection of the human experience, archetypes, symbols, what are we doing here, all of that. Lots of content, lots of good stuff. Very demure. The magician is actually the king of demurity. The magician is the highest level, and it starts to collapse all of this content. And it's where the thesis that the magician is secretly pointing to is as above, so below, is that there is this constant flow between this divine reality and what our experience is. And I want to point you guys to a very specific symbol around his waist. Around his waist, you're going to see a snake that's biting its own tail. Have you ever noticed that? Pretty cool. So there's a snake biting its own tail, and that's like his belt. The snake biting its own tail has been called the Ouroboros, and there's lots of interpretations of it. And I'm going to give you the coolest one. I'm going to give you my favorite one. So the Ouroboros is a snake eating its own tail. So what does that mean? The snake is eating its own tail and is devouring itself. And then as it devours itself, it becomes itself. Okay. As the snake devours itself, it becomes itself in this infinite cycle. Okay. So there's so many places we can go here. In this level, because the snake is devouring its own self directly, there's no content other than itself. So do you remember how I said the first two functions of tarot are content-oriented? What is the content of my personal experience? What is the content of my transpersonal experience and my human experience? In the third level, when we get up here, there's no content but ourselves. Not even ourselves, there's no content but the self. And this is what goes into non-duality, which is I'm going to teach tomorrow. So at this level, this is why there's nothing you can say because there's no content. Oh, there's the paradox. So the snake eating its own tail and the magician itself, the magic of the magician is really not so much that there's energy moving above and below. The magic of the magician is he's pretending that there's somewhere for the energy to go beyond itself. And so the magician is saying, hey, I'm going to show you a magic trick. He's saying this to unity. Remember when I said we can't talk about the fool because he's zero? And I said we bring him back? There's nothing to talk about because there's no content in the fool. The magician comes with his magic and says, hey, I'm going to do a magic trick. I'm going to make something happen. And the illusion of the magician is the rest of the tarot. And so the tarot becomes something called self-reflexive. It goes in on itself. It tries to reflect itself. But a knife can't cut itself, right? It's like the snake eating its own tail is the same paradox, is the symbol of the paradox of self-reflexivity, which is the fact that you look out of your corneas, but you'll never know the colors of your corneas, right? Because they're constant, right? See the paradox? It's the color itself that you see out of. Huh? It's so fun. Zen masters love this shit. So if you, Zen isn't up here, by the way, but if you were to study with the Zen master, they would get you to run into this paradox in all types of ways. And then your intellect breaks and you're like, oh, shit. And then there's the mystical experience. But they're much less superfluous than tarot and all. The Western mysteries are very like, ooh, look, it's magic. It's a magic trick. So when I talk about Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, people with a lot of time in their hands, they come together and they do magic. They don't really need to do it, but why not? It's fun. Let's do some initiations, right? Let's get some robes on, swing some knives around, say some crazy words, some barbaric names or whatever. Yeah, it's magic. And so the priestess comes along. And she doesn't say anything. She's like, oh, he's at it again. She's like, oh my God. And the empress comes along and says, oh, come on, let him have a good time, right? So, okay. So now that I kind of, we talked about the higher level of the magician. And here's the cool thing. Every card, everything I just talked about, that was just the magician. Every card has this higher level. Every card has this self-reflexive paradox where we run into ourselves. And we kind of hit this point of like, oh, I can't really know myself because I'm the one doing the knowing. So if I'm the one doing the knowing, then what is there to be known outside of the knower, right? Do you see the paradox here? You run this in your mind 100 times a day, you'll be enlightened in no time. It's so fun. It's so good. Okay, so that's the highest. Now, but here's the thing. If I were to tell this to a tarot client, I probably wouldn't see them again. So maybe we can bring it down a level and then, make it more relatable. Okay, so that's the highest level of the magician. So that's the deepest level. That's the esoteric meaning. But there's mesoteric and exoteric meaning. So a mesoteric meaning might be the middle level. Middle level is where we look at the function of the transpersonal. Okay. So the transpersonal, as I said, it's exploring content. What type of content? Do you remember? I don't remember. Collective, archetypal, symbolic, the human experience. So how do we explore something that is so wide? How do we explore the human experience? Well, one way is mythology, right? Mythology is huge. It's like this whole set of crazy characters doing crazy and horrible things to each other. I was just watching that show Chaos, that new show of Greek mythology that's on Netflix. It's so good. I loved it. It was fun. It was very cute. It was very like, it was good. It was good. Yeah, just characters doing horrible things to each other. Which is like the world, right? Unfortunately. People do great things to each other too, but it's both. So in The Magician, the way that the magician enters this kind of collective, archetypal, mythological approach, this transpersonal approach, is through Hermes and Mercury. And the way that we study this more collective, more archetypal, more symbolic stuff is through these mystical, is through correspondences. So we have a lot of witches here. We know correspondences, right? So there's this idea in magic, I don't know where it comes from, past couple thousand years, where there's this idea of sympathy. So we say things like, okay, Mars looks red, and when you're angry, you get these red cheeks. So Mars, anger is red, pink, Mars is red must be a color of anger, right? And so there's these sympathies, there's connections that are made. And it's like, I don't know, what's another one? I'm not so good with them anymore. But all of these sympathies, all these connections are an attempt to make sense of the universe and connect these different entities, from planets to experiences to diseases to minerals, plants. There's all these systems of correspondences that are very useful for magic, where you kind of help you use material, whether intellectual or physical material, in your magical process to connect with these deeper things. Because remember, this level is all about connecting with the deeper thing, right? It's not so much that so-and-so is not going to text so-and-so back. It's the feeling in the nervous system of that rejection and that pain and that grief, which is connected to Saturn, which is connected to Bina on the Tree of Life, which is connected to all these different things. Chronos and all this, mythology, astrology. So the way that the tarot can, one of the portals of tarot into this collective sphere is through these correspondences. So the magician's correspondence is Mercury, and Mercury is the planet of travel and communication and transference and transmission. And so with Mercury, he also gets Hermes and all of these psychopompic deities. And what is a psychopompic deity? It's a deity that helps people die, essentially. It's a deity that helps people go from one world to the next. So Hermes is a traveler, Anubis is a traveler, and speaking of one world to the next, there's above and there's below. Oh my God, so it's the connection. So it's the transference, the transmission from above and below. So Mercury, Hermes, what else do we have with the magician? Lots of stuff. All of these help us relate to the part of us that's in motion, the part of us that is moving from point A to point B. The part of us that's in some ways sometimes creative as well, creative motion and inspiration that's activated, that is channeling something from the divine to the below. So notice how everything I'm talking about is a little bit generic, and it's not really like a tarot reading, right? I wouldn't throw this down and be like, oh, this is Mercury, and this is, transmission, and this is about movement. I mean, that's fine, but come on, where's the juice, Joe? Like, tell me what I need to know. Like, what's going to happen? When's he going to text me back, right? So if Mercury comes, if magician comes back, it's going to be like, oh, very soon. How do we go from the archetypal world? This is how we go from archetypal world to the result-oriented world. Very soon is the answer. So very soon, so-and-so is going to text you back very soon is a manifestation below of these more subtle archetypes above that have to do with communication, connection, movement, Hermes, Mercury, all of these things. So we just went from all the way above to all the way below. So all the way above, the magician symbolizes this infinite paradox, the self-reflexive paradox of the snake eating its own tail and self running into self. And an expression of that is above to below, kind of. That's kind of the illusion that there's movement to go. Middle level is Mercury, Hermes. What is Hermes? Is right the transmitter, the messenger god. Language, movement, creativity, all of that. And then the lower level is, yes, he's going to text you back. Or another example might be travel, or communication and a good conversation, or creativity, or manifesting something specific that you love, or connecting to your thoughts. But did you see what I just went from really high to like really low? Not low, but more like local. Okay. So, yeah, any questions about that? Or shares? And notice how the traditional, like tarot, I said in like 2 words. He's going to text you back, right? And majority of what I had to say about magician is all this other stuff that's packed into there. So, do you ever read tarot books where one book will tell you one meaning and one book will tell you another meaning, and you're like, which is it? Come on. The reason why that happens is because, well, there's two reasons. One is because people are interpreting the cards differently, which is great, and everyone has their own interpretation, obviously. But another reason is because divinatory meanings are manifestations of the esoteric meanings. And because they're manifestations, there can be contradicting and various diverse manifestations of the same esoteric meaning. So when we get granular with tarot, actually this is just a truth for anything, the more granular you get with anything, science or whatever, the more varied you're going to see things, right? So the more general you get, the more open you get, the more collective, the more you're looking at types and patterns and models for the neurodivergent, right? The more things kind of make sense, but the more in practice it's all like, oh wait, it doesn't actually make sense because reality is kind of like that, right? But yeah, let's move on to our, I want to go back to the thesis of the magician. So one thing about the magician is, as I said, he's the thesis of the tarot, so he's going to set the tone. And so the movement that's happening here is going to be reflected in every card after him. And so he's kind of saying like, hey, this is the source code. The source code of the tarot is the illusion that there's somewhere to move to. There's the illusion that there's some thing above and something below, and we experience that, right, in manifestation, right? We do manifestation, we do magic, we do intention, we do like, I want this, and we put it in our minds and we get it, right? Who's had that experience? Throw your hands up. Yay, cool. So we experience that, but what he's saying is like, it's magic, but it's an illusion. It's an illusion. And he brings back the Fool. But that movement of intention, manifestation, above to below, whether it's nervous system to body to behavior to life result, whether it's whatever you want to call it, that movement is going to be reflected in every card. And so on the Tree of Life here, every card is a movement from one place into another. So let's see. All right, any questions or reflections? You could also like share something. You don't have to ask a question. You could be like, hey, Joe, that's not true at all. Okay, so let's go back to our holographic model of the universe. So what is a hologram? I don't really know. Let me try to explain it. A hologram is like, you see in Star Wars or whatever, and like, what's her name? Leia, and she's like, Obi-Wan Kenobi or whatever. What did she say? Obi-Wan? Help me, Obi-Wan, right? That's it. I'm losing it, every year. It's just less and less. Help me, Obi-Wan. Okay, so she's a hologram, right? And so the idea of a hologram is that in every piece of the hologram, you could find the whole. It's a 3D rendering of like a 2D thing with light. I don't really know. But the holographic model of the universe is the idea that every piece has the whole, including us, so that each of us represents the whole universe, and oh, yay, we're all a reflection of God. Very Hermetic, very Kabbalistic, very Neoplatonic, very Western esotericism. We are the microcosm of the macrocosm. So in the same way, the tarot cards do that as well. In each card, it is a unit of this very source code that the magician started, this sneaky little source code that Hermes came in and said, hey, I'm going to give you the illusion of momentum and travel and progress so we can have fun. In the Eastern mystical traditions and the Vedanta, this is called Maya, the illusion of name, form, and function, right? That's a real trip. We won't go into that. We'll go into that tomorrow. Yeah. And so he started it. So he started this thing, and then every card is going to continue it. But I want to bring our attention to the Tree of Life right here. Tree of life comes from Qabalah, Jewish mystical tradition, and the tree of life builds a ladder from what? Do you remember? Above and below, God and us, right? So it literally, here we are, you are here, and then this is the monad, the unity, the singularity, God, whatever you want to call it. Yahweh, which way, this way? That way, but not really that way, okay? It's not literally up and down. This is just the map, right? Korzybski says the map is not the territory. Remember that. So the cards have been connected to the tree of life and all these beautiful correspondences. And so the tree of life itself is actually this source code, as above, so below. But in each part of the tree of life, there is this source code, as above, so below, as above, so below, as above, so below, all the way down there. So wherever you're looking at the tarot card, you are exploring this illusion of a source code of creation. That's what it all comes down to, creation, okay? And so the mystical experience is the recognition that there's no part of you that's not of this creation. But let's explore this. So if the magician is the movement of one to the other, what's the high priestess? What does the high priestess mean to you guys? Does anyone, what does it evoke? And if you haven't studied tarot, just what does the image evoke for you? Intuition, love it, yeah. Purity, I love that, beautiful, purity.
Well, I know Golden Dawn stuff, so it's the two columns on either side. It's like the entry into the Solomon's Temple.
Yeah.
Symbolizes that.
Yes, the entrance into Solomon Temple, Akin and Boaz, absolutely, yeah. Yeah. Balance, beautiful, very cool, very cool. So, the movement that was initiated in the magician, we now find in the priestess, but it's a different type of movement. Instead of this direction of above and below, that is, I'm just gonna say it, I'm sorry, this stuff is sexual, people are horny. It's phallic. Tarot, mysticism, they love sexual symbolism. I'm sorry, trigger warning, it gets very sexual. And they're not the first to do it. The Western esotericism, the Eastern stuff, it's very, but it's not like literally sexual. It's because it's all creation, and sex is creation. It's yeah. So, whereas the magician is this phallic gesture, the priestess is this, the opposite, is this negative space almost, where you'll see, everyone knows that behind her veil there's water. There's space behind her. There's two pillars, and she guards the threshold. She's in between, and there's space. You go through her. People are horny. I'm sorry. It's just what it is. I didn't invent it. This is actually not my own projection onto this. This is from the studies. But anyway, tomorrow maybe we'll talk about the whole sexual projection on mysticism, because it's actually very beautiful. If you study like Hinduism and Vedanta and the whole Shiva Shakti relationship, it's actually very, very profound. But people, anyway, what's that?
I remember that last year you mentioned something about Osiris, and I wrote that as a note down because I was like, I never heard about that, like his whole, how he created.
In a lot of mythology, you will find that the feminine archetype represents form and the masculine represents the formless. And that's just because of sex and how that happens. But yeah. Okay, I'm gonna give her one more try because I've sold my soul to YouTube and I can't go back. Okay, she's not doing it. Okay. So the movement was initiated in the magician and is now reflected in the high priestess, but the movement is not so much one of direction through posture, we're actually moving through it. Okay, so there's another movement happening with the priestess, and it has to do with the subconscious. So behind her, if you can see, there is water, right? Behind her veil, if you can see, there's the tree of life behind her, but behind that, can everyone see the ocean behind her? Let me actually show it to you, right? Pretty cool, right? When I first learned that, I was like, oh my God. This is what the intro books don't tell you. But it's this vast ocean. And yet here she is, like this watery figure sitting before us. So one way we can look at this is it's the movement of this vast ocean becoming her in front of us. That's one way to look at it. Or it's the movement of her as a figure being water itself, pouring herself into the ocean behind her. So what does this mean? Well, this is a very classic metaphor. It's like, I don't know who created this one, but it's like, oh, like God is the ocean and our life is when you take the cup and pick up the water, and then we're all these like vessels of divine energy, and then we're poured back into the infinite ocean, right? Yeah, it's very nice. It's terrifying. That's called ego death. It's terrifying. It's so scary. Anyway, she represents the threshold of that. She represents that the in-between of this personal self. Here we go back to personal to transpersonal. This personal self with all this water pouring itself into the infinite waters behind her, which is more the collective. And so whereas the magician is taking the infinite nature of the above and drawing it down below in manifestation and or creation, the priestess is taking the infinite nature of the water behind her and pouring it into her own self forward in front of you. So we have up, down, back, and forward. Yeah, so that's one esoteric interpretation. A sort of more mesoteric interpretation might, or exoteric interpretation is that she represents connection to the divine and reflection in the subconscious and intuition. So in a reading, right, she represents intuition. So why does she represent that? Because she's the threshold between the personal and the transpersonal. And when we use our intuition, what's happening is our unconscious, Carl Jung over here, our unconscious is pouring into our personal consciousness for a moment to give us some information, right? And so she is that threshold. Very cool, very cool. And then the highest interpretation would be she collapses the distance between the highest of the high and the personal self. So she runs through here. She collapses the distance between the unitive mystical experience and the personal sense of self, the ego, right there. Cool. Any questions on priestess?
Could you give me like an example of how you would interpret that to somebody else? Like I don't know how to explain that.
Yeah, how would I interpret this for somebody else? Like if I was giving them a reading? So here's the difference. If I'm giving a reading, so right now I'm like teaching, and so if I'm giving a reading, I might teach a bit, but it not necessarily, it depends on the person. So in that case, you're helping them on the personal level. So if you're helping them on the personal level, you take these deeper meanings and you see what I'm teaching you is like the source of the meanings of the card. And so in an actual reading, you would say, okay, intuition, the subconscious, maybe secrets. So it's almost like the divinatory meanings are like the outer, more superficial layer of the deeper meanings. So it depends on the context. You're gonna wanna look at context, what the surrounding cards are, what the question is, what you're feeling. Actually, most importantly, you wanna focus on what you're feeling, what you're intuiting, what's kind of just naturally coming to you. But what I almost wanna invite people to do, and this is really going to the next level, and this is what tarot readers don't do as much, but at least they're starting to do at Tarot Mysticism Academy, is incorporating this knowledge so that the priestess doesn't just mean, it doesn't just say, okay, it's time to open yourself up to your intuition. Like that's cool, but I mean, like we could read that in a book, right? Like we all know we should maybe trust our intuition, right? That's a good message, but what does that mean? What is underlying that? Like how do we do that? And what does that mean for who we are and what we are? Like the priestess shows us that it says, okay, but what is our intuition? It is our relationship between the personal self and the collective self. So she is urging us to, well, she's not urging us because she's quiet, she doesn't do anything, she just chills. But the invitation here is to move past the veil into the waters. And to open the intuition, one softens the ego, softens the personal self that she's representing for us, and starting to expand into the boundless ocean behind her, right? So she kind of gives us an answer as well as the prescription. She gives what the order is. Open yourself up to intuition. How do you do that? Well, look at her. She's melting. She's water melting into the ocean behind her. So she's asking us to soften the ego, soften what we think is the right thing, stop holding on to ourselves so much, stop trying so hard, and just soften, right? The symbols point to that, but it's like you have to work with them to get there. And that to me is so much more like practical than like, I'll just trust your intuition. Because the ego is something we all feel. We all hold on to things. We all have a grip on something, right? We all have our attachments. So to loosen them a little bit, and then she means, but see, there's other contexts too. That she means secrets as well, and the connectivity of all things. So that's just one way you can bring all the symbols in. Does that kind of make sense? But see, what happens at this level is you pull one card, and then all of a sudden it's like, it's a whole freaking like lecture. It's a whole like, transmission of wisdom. It's like boom, and it's all there, But it's using the cards in a different way, and it's not easy to do because we are so used to like using them in a more divinatory or fortune-telling manner. But yeah, last sexual reference, and then we're done. All right, so magician, phallic, priestess, she's receptive, threshold. Okay, we got one, we got the other, and then the empress is the result. What is the empress? The empress is the fertility of the mind and the fertility of the world. This is the baby-making moment, right? So the empress is the gestation, is the fertilization, all of that. And so the movement that was initiated in the magus, that we experience through the priestess, through the relationship with the infinite waters, the relationship with collective unconscious, the moving forward through the threshold, that movement is now happening in her belly. Yay. But the birth that's happening is not just a human, but all of nature, all of form, all of visual. That's why I had to figure out my camera. It's all of what you can see, what you can touch, what you can taste, the diversity of experience. And so let's do a quick kind of run through of her 3 levels. So on the highest level, so we know that the highest level is this kind of self-reflexive, kind of paradoxical, kind of like running into yourself thing. At the highest level, she represents, a really cool way to understand her is like, I think Alan Watts talked about how form and color are mutually arising. You ever think about that? Form and shape and color, right? One can't exist without the other. So that mutually arising nature of shape and color is her like domain. She is the mutually arising nature of experience itself. By one experience, if it is an experience, must be different from another experience, right? Because a constant you'll never notice, right? The colors of your corneas, they're a constant. You'll never know the color, right? A knife can't cut itself. But this arising nature of one thing versus another, that is what she's all about. I know that's very generic. What are you talking about? It's high up there. When we come down a bit, what does that mean mythologically or conceptually? It means Gaia, Mother Earth, Aphrodite, love, relationships, right? All these fun things. Venus. Yeah, there's so many correspondences, but it's all about the coming together of this and that, this and other, the diversity of experience that allows for love. Allows for love. So there's cosmic love, which is not like the poetic of love, right? But then the manifestation of that is the love, right? The love songs and the is he going to text me back and all of that. So on the lower end, the Empress can, in the personal level, can symbolize pregnancy, fertility, can symbolize relationships, can symbolize beauty and love and falling in love and caring for a child and nurturing and literally nature in this beautiful place that we're at right now at Anahata's purpose. All of that, but all of that is a manifestation of level 2, Aphrodite, relationship, which is all a manifestation of something more ontological, the very arising of different experiences. You see how deep it can go? And then we just keep on going. That's every card can go that far. Can I do that for all the cards? Yes, I can. It's called Tarot Mysticism Academy. No, but seriously, yes. So like, I run something called Tarot Mysticism Academy. I mentioned it before. It's like a year-long program. We have over a dozen different courses now that cover tarot in all these different contexts. I teach tarot in the context of Hermetic Qabalah, in the context of astrology and symbolism and practical use of tarot and all these different ways. So yes, there's lots of stuff there, but tarot divination course is a course I teach that kind of has a rundown of some of these levels, but some of the deeper stuff, like the level 3 I'm talking about, I teach that in something called Mysticism for Misfits. And I might do a new course. I might do something called Tarot Mysticism Process, where I actually focus on just these deeper, more ontological brain melting levels. Thank you all so much for being here. I had so much fun with you. If you have any questions, I'll probably send out the video or something. I'll connect with you guys there. But Joe Monteleone is my name. YouTube channel has all my stuff, and I really look forward to seeing you guys throughout the rest of the weekend. Stay hydrated, keep going to stuff. Lots of amazing workshops and facilitators, and thanks. Much love.
Thank you.